So, in addition to Jennifer, we have Mark Jonathan, lighting designer, who does a lot of dance as well as opera and theatre. John B. Reed, who practically was the staff lighting designer, I want to say, for the Royal Ballet for many years. Is that not incorrect?
That's true, yeah.
And
I was 16 when I went to my first master class given by this young lighting designer.
I have to say that John was very young at the time, too. But, yes, so John B. Reed, still lighting a lot for the Royal Ballet. Lucy Carter, who's carving out a very large career for herself, lighting all around, doing theatre and a lot of dance, sometimes for the Royal Ballet and in venues both large and small. Michael Hulls, leading lighting designer who works mostly in modern dances. He says he's got an extensive list of 3 clients that seem to keep him very busy, but does very deep collaboration with those 3 choreographers, and so therefore really integrating light into the performance in a way that most of us would only dream of. And then Nick Moran, who is a lighting designer and, as you all know, is the resident head of lighting tutoring, I guess, here at Central School of Speech and Drama. And now I'll shut up and go away. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rick. Do feel free to jump in and add your contributions, because this needs to be a fully integrated thing. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for a very stimulating talk today, and also for a lovely talk with the students yesterday. What I wanted to start with was maybe from each of the distinguished lighting designers. I feel slightly nervous here in this company. Your approach to collaboration and creation of work, new work, especially with choreographers. Because after all, Jennifer's talked very eloquently about showing people things on stage, but of course, for most of the time, the collaboration begins where you have no lights to show people. Michael, how would you start?
Okay, well, one of the things I'm interested in is actually not starting there, but starting with a light and a dancer, and being able to use light as a catalyst to create choreography. As early in the process as possible, my ideal is to be somewhere that I can start working with lights, and I've been working with choreographer and dancer Russell Malafant for 20 years now, and we set out a long time ago to try and do that. So ideally we turn up at a studio somewhere where I can rig some lights and say to Russell, I'm interested in exploring this light and trying to find something that works with it. And equally, Russell turns up and says, and I'm interested in moving like this. And then we put those 2 things together, and if we're lucky, we discover something that is exciting for both of us. That is the start of then developing something. One of the things that Russell said about working that way is that previously, as a choreographer, in his head, when he's thinking about making a work, he's thinking that he's got a certain amount of space to fill. And one of the things that he realized, if we worked in this way, that the space can be as big or as small as is needed for a particular moment. So that was something kind of liberating for the choreographer in working that way, was to say, actually, I don't need to worry about this sort of 10 metre by 12 metre space, because it might be 2 metres by 1 metre, or even smaller, or something that size. And you can choreograph to a light that is on stage is that size, and you can make something for it. How long that can sustain itself is another question, but so that's kind of where I come at it from, is to be able to start with light from the very beginning, and be totally involved in a creative partnership between light and dance.
Thank you. Lucy?
Yeah, I think the way I most like to work, and it doesn't always happen like this, and the way I've kind of become accustomed to working with some of the choreographers that I regularly work with is, it's really interesting to hear Michael talk, because I don't start with the light. We start with the conceptual idea, and in something that Jennifer said, that she doesn't want to be told what the piece is about. I work from the point where I really want to discuss what the piece is about, and I do a lot of research then, after that, about not necessarily how someone might have done it if it's a theatre piece, but around the subject, the initial concept and around that subject. And then have ideas that aren't about light, but are about helping portray that or helping to realise that concept in light, alongside the choreographer who's trying to realise that or portray it through the movement. And it's not until I've had the ideas that I then start thinking, how can I show that in light? So I kind of work in a different way from Michael, which is interesting because I always thought we were quite similar in the way we work. So, and then after I've discovered how I might do that in light, I would then look at the equipment available to try and work out how I can realise those ideas.
Thank you. John, you more or less defined the equipment available at the Royal Opera House.
Yeah, I mean, I started years ago when we were lucky if we had 2,500 watt downlights. Maybe we had 3 2K backlights, and we had an eye level and a shimbuster ×4 on each side. And my first ballet that I ever lit was for Glenn Tetley, and I'd never lit a ballet before. I'd always lit plays. And on the way to the rehearsal room, I thought, how on earth am I going to write this lot down? Because you know, if you do a play, you write the moves in the script. There's no script, so I devised this method of write squares and little dots and dashes and bits and pieces. I had no idea how you light a ballet, and I was just talking to Tetley because I thought, I've got to find out how you do it. Big challenge, because Tetley was at his peak as a dancer and was choreographing and had his own company in New York. And I managed to get him to say, well, actually what you need is you need an eye-level side light and you need a shimbuster. And I thought, shimbuster? What do you mean a shimbuster? Well, anyway, those were the two things. And he said, and you might need a top light. So I said, okay, top light, eye-level side light, shimbuster. But that's all he ever said to me the whole time that I ever worked for him. I'd go to places like Munich or Stuttgart to look at a ballet, try to get him to find, get him to tell me what it was about. He never would. So in the end, I just gave up and thought, well, there's only one way to do it, and it's the way that I still use now, which is to go to rehearsal and just feel it. You could taste it on the tip of your tongue. You can feel it down your nose, what's coming out choreographically. Listen to the choreographer talking to the dancers is the key to it all, as far as I'm concerned now. If they do tell you something, it's a load of nonsense. It's, you know, I mean, they'll just say anything to get you out of the way. When you think about it, when somebody's choreographing, they don't even know themselves where it's going to go, how it's going to develop. And it's nerve-wracking for a lighting designer not to be able to say, well, I need to tick these boxes, I've got to produce a layout by next week because the hire company wants the stuff. Can we afford it? Can the management deal with it? It's different now when lights are 10 a penny and everybody's got far too much equipment and it's all permanent rigs. That's a whole different problem which we could deal with. But that's really how I started, and that's the way I have to work now. So that if I'm doing a piece, it's watching rehearsal, you get instinctively a mood from the music, whatever, and you talk to designers about where they think they're going to go with it. And I'm always slightly suspicious of designers in certain aspects, but I think that their thinking is not the same as yours. You give so much quality and you're so totally honest about where you're coming from and where you're going to. And I don't find scenic designers have that ability, so I'm particularly wary of that. But so that's where I go. That's the way I start, and that's why I've always done it.
Very interesting, John. Yes. I like to think that when I'm starting off on the piece, that I'm a sponge. You know, I soak up anything they'll give me, and I'm desperate, as well as seeing rehearsals, to hear what they've got to say about it, or what they might be meaning in the dance. And I've done a few ballets with the same choreographer, so I was used to working with him, and I'd been to rehearsal, and this was a more complex ballet. It wasn't in the same way as a story ballet might be, you know, clear in where it was going. So I said to him, tell me about the piece. Tell me what you're doing. And he said, oh, I don't need to tell you anything. You just know what to do. And I said, yeah, but that's because we have these conversations. So there's that. Sometimes, you know, I'll get inspired and I have these ideas, and I might risk talking to the design about it, you know, be waving my arms around because I've got some kinetic idea or something, and, you know, they maybe glaze over. And of course, there's that thing, we can have a conversation where we talk about 201 in the cross lights and 120 if we turn the number around the other way in the backlight, and you could visualize what we're talking about, the dark blue on the floor and the crisp, cold cross light on the dancer. But of course, most of the designers or maybe the choreographers would or wouldn't engage in that. So I feel it's a rather one-way conversation that might be happening in terms of how I'm going to respond. And it's that terrible moment which you've all been through when you sit at the production desk and you make something and you say, what do you think of that? And there's this silence as your life passes in front of you, and you wait to hear some encouraging noises. I think that's the same though, play, opera, ballet. And it's only then, when we get them on the stage, that we can really show what we were talking about when we were waving our arms about, or talking about colour in a room. It's only when we get the dancers or the actors on the stage. That's why it was so lovely today to have them dancing in a front light and back light. I've said too much. Jennifer.
Well, I just wanted to say that, you know, time is such a blessing, and that Michael can work for a long period of time on one thing. It becomes more and more difficult because, of course, time is money. And so take any opportunity that you have to do that. I work with the Worcester Group, and they have, it's called the Worcester Group because there is a garage space on Worcester Street that is their permanent residence. And their rehearsals, they rehearse a project for, I would say, 2 years. And every day that they rehearse in full costume and makeup and full production, full light, etc. I mean, it may not be full light if the rig should be extensive because they don't want to rent extra equipment perhaps until we go into a theater. But certainly, so I could be there every day for, you know, a third or a half of a year. The other 2/3 or half they spend touring. But that's how they develop pieces. Now, the difference between Michael's work and my working with the Worcester Group is that Russell sort of pays attention to the light, and I can't say that Liz does, but never mind. It does. It is able to develop over that time, and it's just a pure sort of diamond gift that you have. And just an aside, listening to John B. Reed talk about the Opera House, I remember I was there when they were doing a Balanchine piece, and they had first really bright backlights. They were 5Ks or something, and they were so bright that they made the Marley ripple. I'll never forget. And, I feel that working with a choreographer, you see, is like working with the playwright. Working with the director, you have someone outside of the piece who really has a point of view about the piece. The choreographer is inside and may not even know what the piece is from the outside. So it's a very different kettle of fish working with directors and working with choreographers. And in a sense, that's why I say that when I go to a studio to see a piece, I don't want to talk to the choreographer I want to talk to the choreographer a lot, but not until I've seen the piece once through, so I can be innocent audience that first time through. Directors are very articulate usually and very sort of brainy and have ideas about the production that can stimulate ideas in the light that don't necessarily, I mean, the director may say nothing about the light, but they sort of stimulate ideas about the light. Choreographers, some choreographers can and do, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. They, it's a case-by-case sort of situation. There are no rules. It is chemistry, and if I like a piece, I find that my lighting can be wonderful. If I don't respond to the piece, it may be simply adequate or maybe not so hot. It's very interesting to me. There are so many things that affect how one sees through light, so it's not easy.
Would you like to respond to anything that Jennifer said?
Yeah, okay. Time. You were talking about time in a practical sense. The little demonstration you showed earlier, where everything was in 5 seconds and then exactly the same sequence again, but what had been modulated was the timing of it. And for me, then, what was quite mechanical and regular starts to have poetry to it. And although it's a completely abstract, it's just some lights in a space and 2 bodies moving in it, it seemed a demonstration that by working with time, that abstract event that's happening can start to have an emotional impact on someone watching it. And so it's just energy in a space and time, and out of those 2 things, an emotional relationship is created, and that's, I guess, what fascinates me in working, is how out of the most simplest things, non-narrative. I only work in dance. I don't work in theatre because I'm really interested in the abstract and how one can create an emotional relationship with the abstract. So that was just the thing about this question of time is really, really important. And I'm sure if given the chance that we could all spend a lot of time fiddling about with that cue and whether it should be in 10 seconds or 7 seconds or 8 seconds. And that's the difference between 7 and 10 seconds can be monumental. And the other thing about that is, talking about computers and computer technology earlier, and you were talking about counting the cues and then being able to count faster or slower. But I think that is something that can get lost in technology, and that it's like we're talking about live performance, and so unless it's, you know, completely mechanical, it's impossible for it to be the same every time. And one of the things that changes is the timing of it. And when I became a lighting designer by accident, and I started off improvising with an improvising dancer. So everything was done, and because I wasn't a lighting designer before that, it didn't seem very scary, but it does seem a lot scarier now. So everything was done in real time, and they're dancing, and I don't know what they're going to do, and I don't know what I'm going to do, so I'm improvising, and I'm sliding manual faders around. And there's a very close relationship in timing between what the light is doing and what the dance is doing. And then many years later, after I started plotting shows into lighting desks, I was with Russell in Australia, doing first ever shows by Russell in Australia. And I'm not particularly good with technology and lighting boards, and at about 7:45, with the show going on at 8 o'clock, I managed to, instead of record onto a blank disc the show as a backup, I loaded a blank disc and just flushed 4 hours of plotting down the toilet. And so I had 15 minutes to get my stuff together from scratch. So all I could do was like, okay, well, I'll deal with Act 1 and load some lights onto manual submasters, and I'll just have to blag my way through Act 1 manually and sort out Act 2 in the interval. And so I did that, and the show went pretty well. And what I realized afterwards, that what I did manually was much superior to what I'd spent 4 hours plotting into that desk and set in terms of time, because I wasn't living the moment in performance and fractionally, or speeding up and slowing down what I'm doing at every little moment. It's and it made me remember starting off as improvising, and then I thought, I just don't want to go there again. It was quite a sweaty, nervous experience, but it taught me something that I'd forgotten about timing and over-reliance on the mechanics of computer technology that kind of take a lot of that away from it.
I just taking the speed of a fade. When I started, we did it manually. And the lighting designer might have said 10 seconds, but invariably we were doing a decelerating 10 seconds. So as it got darker, so you slowed the fade down. So it just hovered at the end and then blackout. And I know there's some top programmers in the room, and if I ask them to do something like that for me, they probably need quite a bit of time to program that in, unless we've got some sort of learning profile thing. But that was what we did, and we really felt it. And my most exciting time was being in the orchestra pit, because it was before we could put a lighting desk that far away, because we had, it was analog and there was a wire for every channel. The furthest we could get the lighting desk was the side of the stage box, or the orchestra pit was in the orchestra pit. And I ended up in the orchestra pit doing Fidelio, and the conductor said to me, now look, at the end I want you to do a really slow fade, okay? We'll just go on and on and on, and you just go really, really slowly. And I said, what do you mean, really slowly? He said, yeah, really slowly, okay? And I'm next to the conductor. God knows how we ended up with it down there anyway. Glyndebourne on tour, and we're going really slowly, and the violins are running out. And they're going back the other way, and there are people blowing things, looking at the conductor and then looking at me, and the conductor's looking at me going, slowly, and I'm going really slowly. The next day we got a review in the Telegraph that talked about the lights fading. And it was being urged by the conductor to just go as slow as you want. God knows what Beethoven would have thought. I hope he would have liked it. But now, we get the regular thing. we know, as you said, it's always going to be the same at 10 seconds, but we lose that frisson, excitement, where we were really part of the music, or in the movement, in the way that we had to respond in moving those levers. It would help us if they didn't move smoothly.
There are so many things that play into that about skill levels of the people who are putting behind the desks and how much faith we put in them. That can go on for a long time. John, do you want to?
Yes, I'm sure it is possible, even with today's boards, to operate them manually. One of the problems, I mean, if you take the Opera House, for example, where we have a board operator on a show and a backup board operator, the plots have to be written in such a way that everybody can understand how they're written and how they operate. Because one operator may not work in the same way. And so if an operator is off, it's a problem. One of the other things about that house, well, I think we've got the skills level to be able to do that, except that that box is 150 feet away, double glass, whatever. Just last week we opened Romeo and Juliet. We had a conductor in the pit who actually put 4 minutes onto the ballet. So stage management were all over the place. You know, they didn't know where they were coming. And I managed to jump in a couple of times from the box and say, go now. That sort of thing. But we were trying to look at follow spot levels as well, because we had a crew on who are particularly dim, and I felt from inside the box that I wasn't getting enough for the heightened part of there that we needed, and stepped outside the box to have a look. But at that throw, it's very, very difficult to do it. I mean, I take your point about manual falls, because donkey's years ago, I was the board operator at Chichester on the Olivia Othello, and I could put 1:30 seconds onto the running time just by the fades. And Olivia loved it, of course. Yeah. So, I mean, it was wonderful. But to get that back now, I'm sure we could get them to write programs that would actually deal with that. Again, we don't get the rehearsal time that we need on stage. You're lucky if you get a focus, because everybody says, oh, you don't need a focus now, you've got all this movie stuff. You do, actually, need to focus.
Well, we focus it up in the cinema now, don't we?
We focus it up, yeah, in the vision suite. And I hope that it's going to come down onto the stage. Mostly it does, but we certainly don't get that sort of luxury of lighting time to be able to deal with that. But somehow we've got to find a way back to get those things, to grab those things back somehow or other.
Along with incandescence.
Yeah. Along with incandescence.
I've got a question, Nick. I wonder, am I the only lighting designer on the panel who's been desperately lighting over the rehearsal, and the rehearsal stops, and over the God mic you hear the director or the choreographer saying to the dancer, have you got a problem? And the dancer says, you know, they rarely speak, but the dancer says, yes, I can't dance in this light. And then over the God mic you hear, Mark, darling, can you do something about that?
No.
Am I the only one?
No, you're not the only one.
But that's interesting, because Michael isn't, because it's a different set of relationships that he's built with his choreographer.
Can I just ask Marco, have you ever tried doing a balance for a jump in the shoes? It's hard.
Yeah. No, I've gone up there. And I've had a go, and I've done it in front of the entire cast of the Royal Ballet, and they went, good on him, he had a go then, you know.
But that's their job, not our job.
Yeah.
No, but it is, and I think, certainly we experienced it yesterday with the students, where Jennifer got us to go up and be in the light. It is important to go and feel what it's like.
But you do get up there and realise you couldn't do it.
Crikey, how do
because
they do it?
They're amazing.
Yeah.
Because they're amazing.
Yes, well, and it's the floor lights, the shin busters that are cut off the floor, so the floor disappears. The floor is not in light, and you lose your balance. It's very difficult. And I did a piece of Twyla's once that was simply the floor lights, and she had a great trouble doing it, but she kept insisting that she was going to, and she got so that she could. So
It's
I
also
was
a good
willing to
idea
change it.
sometimes, I find, to get the dancers to come out and see how it looks, because then they know they look fantastic, and then they work really hard to find a way. Of course, sometimes you have to help them, of course.
The other thing we find that at the start of the season, when the company are on stage after they've been off for 5 weeks, that first rehearsal in full lights with all the side lights, they're on stage right for the first 60 seconds, and then we can't do it, you know. So Monica Mason will say, "John, can you do something about this?" And I always say, yes, of course. Yes, we're working on it. So we might take them down a little bit, but we don't plot it, of course, you know, and the next day they're back up again and they get used to it.
But yes, also, but the light is changing. I mean, you begin by putting things up at what you think should be the readings, and then you balance things. And as things gets balanced, they, first of all, are getting used to it, as you say, but it's also better. It's also easier when the balance is right. So it just takes time.
We've got very few minutes left, but I just wondered if we could investigate this business of the lighting designer, the dramaturgical role of the lighting designer. Dramaturgy is a misused and poorly defined term in English, but I think what you meant by it is something to do with storytelling, something to do with revealing an inner thread that lighting can bring. I wonder if you'd like to expand on that, and then maybe the rest of us could comment.
I just want to say that there is the story of the play, or the dance, that has to be made clear. But the wonderful thing about the world of light is that light has a story that can run parallel to that story, and that's why I love the mystery of it.
Yeah.
That short-circuited that one then. You tell stories. You tell fabulous stories with your life.
Thanks. Just to go back to something Jennifer said earlier, it's about the whole picture. So if I'm working on something, even if it's just me and Russell messing around in a light, but I think because I have a background in theatre and dance rather than in lighting, that I'm always looking for the whole picture and want to be a kind of, as much as I can, an equal creative partner in making that whole picture. My particular area of responsibility is the lighting and how that fits into it, but I'm equally interested in the decisions about music, or if it's involving text, or obviously any other visual, media involved, usually because I'm dealing with an empty space, a black empty space. That's the costumes is the other visual element, but that's my kind of approach to the whole picture, is that there's a kind of creative team that are making a piece of theatre. I mean, I'm including dancers, it's theatre, and that's the whole picture, and that everything has to serve that in an equal way as possible.
I recently had an experience with a producer and it was a story ballet dance, and a producer who's seen my work a lot, but she said to me after the whole process, "I'm amazed, I didn't really realise that you'd contribute so much to the storytelling, and that in meetings you'd be solving our problems for us." This is an example of how people don't think that lighting design is a part of the dramaturgy.
Yeah.
But we have to be.
You both work with the large companies on big stages. How much do you think it's recognised your contribution to telling the story there, John?
Well, I think quite a lot. I mean, I think the lighting designer's input is very, very important at every single level. I mean, once the choreographer's got going on the thing, if I feel something about the piece that he's working on, I will say so in the most subtle way. If I feel that something's not working choreographically, I that's not really my business, and I'm not a dancer or a choreographer, but if I can find a way that I can let him know that I feel something about the work that he's making, try to push him or make him aware that there could be something a little better or different, I'll do that, because I think it all interacts together, and then they build the confidence with you, so you can get a good dialogue going. It's interesting what you said earlier about everything comes together. The thing that worries me a lot now, every single production I do, is whether I've got it right or not. I mean, when I was a young lighting designer, I was very forceful, opinionated. What I said went, and I think with horror about the way I dealt with people maybe 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, Ninette de Barbault said to me once, "Why are you turning the lights off, dear boy?" And I thought, what the hell is she talking about? And 10 years later, I realised what she was talking about, because I'd taken the lights out during the Rose d'Arche, for example. And you don't take the lights out for the Rose d'Arche, do you? But at that time in my career, I was doing that. It's so wrong, so wrong. But even now, I never know whether I've got the level right until I see it as a member of an audience. If I sit out front, I can usually tell, and I sometimes think, oh my God, I've underlit it. Or even worse, I've overlit it. You know? So I never know where I am with it until I see it 2 or 3 times. And what's interesting, we have at the Opera House, with stuff coming back in repertoire. I mean, the Romeo and Juliet that we have at the moment, I've lit for the last 20 years there. Before that, Bill Bundy lit it for 20 years. The production's 45 years old. So over that 20-year period, I've actually changed the plot. Georgiada's changed the set about 10 years ago, drastically refining it and getting rid of a lot of the flowery stuff, which made that we had to work in a permanent set, which made it more difficult. But even so, the choice of colour and level has changed over that period of time. When I look back at some of the colours that we used 20 years ago, I just shudder to think what they must have looked like on the stage. And we don't do that. You know, we change it. So, but even with a short term, a production coming back every 2 years, you can look at what you did last time and think, oh my God, did I really do that? Because it feels so wrong. And it's very difficult to go to anyone and ask an opinion, to get a real opinion of where you should be with it. So you've got to trust yourself, but it is a difficult one. I don't know whether you find that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about there not being trust in the need for the light designer from the choreographer or the director. And indeed, I was in one of those fundraising things where the richest people in the land who were paying for the ballet were in the room, and the director of the Royal Ballet said, and I was just sipping on some Veuve Clicquot at the time. Of course, the most important person in the room, and I thought she was going to say Lord Sainsbury, who's paid for it, is indeed our lighting designer, Mark Jonathan, at which point the Veuve Clicquot went up my... it started to come out of my nose, because I just wasn't expecting it. I'd just taken a sip. But my point is that in another room in the same organisation, there was a contracts department, but we'd better turn the camera off at this point. There was a contracts department which was saying, I don't understand why the lighting designers are getting so uppity, because was reported to me by another lighting designer, all they do is turn the lights on and off when they're told to by the director or the choreographer. Because we know we do a lot more than just turn them on and off when we're told to. But I just thought within the same organisation there was 2 very different understandings about the contribution we were making. But of course, the thing that, it's very interesting, John, to hear you talking about the longevity of the ballet and coming back to it, because they don't really want us to come back, I think. They just want to put it on quick. And they don't really want us coming and interfering or having a new idea or going, what drugs was I on when I put that colour in, let's change
That's
it.
because we need time.
We need time.
And
I've written a word down here, time. They don't want us to spend any time. And it's, can you do the job in the time? Or, you know, that's what when you look at my work, it's what I managed to do in the time. In fact, that's my tombstone quote, isn't it?
Yes.
He did what he could in the time.
With the kit they gave him.
If I've got a bigger tombstone, then it goes into details.
But let's not.
And the budget and everything else.
But let's not finish on quite such a down.
Sorry. No, it's all great. It's great. I love it. Yeah.
Jennifer, you talked about how teaching has enhanced your lighting design, and that's something that rings very true for me. I wonder if you'd just finish off our discussion this evening by somehow encouraging some of my colleagues here to also engage in teaching and delivering as an aid to their own design as well as an end in itself.
Well, it certainly has improved my lighting. Got immensely better when I started teaching. And I find there's nothing that is more rewarding. Young people are eager to learn, and it's just great to be around them. And I feel that I feel much younger because I'm around young people. It's great. I recommend it. Encourage you to do it.
So that's it. A recommendation to take my job. Michael Holtz, Lucy Carter, John B. Reid, Mark Jonathan, and most principally our honoured guest, Jennifer Tipton. Thank you all very much.